Do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. Take the risk. The worst thing that can happen is you'll fail and you'll learn and you'll grow. Figure out who you are as an educator, what you really believe, and then take some risks and look for opportunities to expand your passion.
This is the Engaging Leadership Show where we uncover the stories and strategies behind successful educational leadership. Imagine that you're running an elementary school, but your goal is to raise happy and healthy 35-year-olds. How does that work? Today's guest is a principal who believes that the foundation of that starts in elementary school and starts with social emotional learning, giving students the tools that they need to be able to grow up with grit, perseverance, and optimism. How exactly does she do this? We're going to find out on today's episode of the Engaging Leadership Show. Today's guest has spent over 2 decades in the classroom before transitioning into administration, bringing a wealth of experience from teaching into leadership. She was also a former Teachers Union president and holds a master's degree from Columbia University. And it's always good to have another alum on the show. So it's a great privilege for me to be interviewing today Julie MacArthur. She's the principal of Brewer Island Elementary School in Foster City, California. Julie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So tell me a little bit more about your school, the community that you serve, all the details.
Yeah, Brewer Island, we are in Foster City. We have a very diverse community. Our school is pre-K special day class all the way through 5th grade. We speak over 30 languages at my school. We have a wonderful staff who has been here for decades themselves. When I first went back to teaching after my kids were small, this was the school I returned to teaching to. And I think it's just such a testament to the community that we have here that most of the teachers who are here were here when I was teaching with them 20 years ago. I don't think you find that in a lot of places in education. And so I feel very honored and fortunate to be back in this wonderful community with amazing parents, amazing kids. We're a small school. We have just over 300 kids. But the thing I love the most about it is just a really joyful place to come every day. No matter what happens, I know I'm going to be met with a lot of smiles, a lot of laughter, a lot of kids engaged in learning. And I'm just so privileged to be able to lead the school here.
That is amazing. With 300 students, but over 30 languages. What's the breadth of the languages that you guys have? Give some
Um,
example.
Spanish is our largest. We have a lot of Mandarin speakers, Japanese speakers. We have Japanese speakers on staff, which is great. A lot of Portuguese speakers, also Portuguese speakers on staff. It makes it a really rich experience. I have a student who's teaching me Portuguese. He comes in every day and teaches me some new phrase. See you later, for some reason, is really difficult for me to remember. He has to do a lot of reteaching with that one, and I definitely use my growth mindset and remember it this time. But yeah, the kids are very proud of their cultures and their heritage. We're in the process right now of doing our talent show, and we have Polynesia dancers in our talent show, a lot of taekwondo, a lot of piano playing. It's just a rich cultural place to be, and I feel very lucky that I get to spend my days here.
That's amazing. And you're quite a veteran at the district, at that school as well. You have that degree of closeness and rapport with the teachers that have been with you. Did you say the past 18 years, was that?
Yes, I left the school as a teacher about 18 years ago, and I went to a different school for a little while, and then I was at a different school in our district for about 15 years, and then I was in the middle school in this district for about 2 years. The opportunity to come back as the principal at Brewer presented itself, and I, without hesitation, jumped on the opportunity, and I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. One of the things that we were talking about, and I think it's
super relevant in a school that's as diverse as yours is this whole concept of social emotional learning. And part of it comes from that pride that you might have in the heritage that you bring to school every day, but at the same time, the richness of the diversity that you interact with, I am sure contributes in no small way to positive social emotional outcomes. But there are so many misconceptions about this concept, and so many people have different ideas about what it isn't. And for the purposes of today's episode, I think it's great for us to maybe just narrow that down. What exactly does social emotional learning, or SEL, mean to you?
For me, it really is the lens through which I view learning, through which I think my teachers view learning. I think initiatives that come through education, there's always some level of misunderstanding around it. I think a lot of times we think that SEL is really just touchy-feely and feeling good and maybe having some kumbaya moments, but it's really more. We know from research that kids can't learn as well if they don't have a strong sense of self, and so I think SEL is giving them that. It's a lot more than just understanding your feelings. For me, it really is the lens through which I view how students will bring themselves to the classroom every day.
I like that. So it's almost like the student's entire outlook of the world and how they see themselves, how they see their place in the world also.
Yeah, absolutely, and I there's so much academics embedded in it. For example, math is a subject that a lot of times people, if you don't really understand SEL deeply, you might think there's no social emotional learning in math, but the reality is even the new math frameworks talk a lot about productive struggle and the importance of that in learning math, and I think SEL really is our role as educators is giving students the tools to deal with that productive struggle. Even if they're maybe mathematically inclined to start, if they don't have that growth mindset, they'll hit a ceiling and then they will be limited. But if we've given them the SEL tools, perseverance, grit, an appreciation of struggle, then they'll start to cultivate in themselves this belief that struggle will lead to results. Like their efforts will be meaningful, they will get to where they're going. For some kids, that's inherent and they naturally tend towards a growth mindset. And for some students, it has to be taught pretty explicitly. And we do that for naming it for them. When we see them do it, we name it for them and we point out when they're using a growth mindset. So when I say that it's the lens through which we teach students, it really is not just teaching them what it means to be caring, but also why it's okay to struggle. It's really helping them navigate their emotions, not just understand them.
That's a really interesting concept that we talked about productive struggle within the context of mathematics. Let's unpack that a little bit more because I can see how it relates to social emotional learning. How does that relate to mathematics? Because from a very layperson point of view, when you're approaching math, you either get it, and when you don't get it, it's extremely demoralizing because you have to really force yourself to be able to see it before you get it. And how does this concept apply in math?
So it's interesting that we are teaching students that like seeing it and visualizing math is actually really important. But we used to use a formula for teaching where it was like the teacher would do it, then you would do it together, and then you would do it independently. What we actually know now from research around Jo Boaler's work at Stanford and her work with Carol Dweck around growth mindset is a better approach is to have the kids do it, struggle, look at it together, and then have the teacher come in last to work with them on it. But we need to empower students in math to be okay with not knowing and to feel comfortable enough and confident enough to ask questions, to ask why until they actually get it. And we know that for a lot of people in math, hasn't been their math experience in school. It wasn't my math experience in school. I feel like I only went so far in math because I was willing to hang in there and do it until it got really hard. And then I felt like that said something about myself that I didn't get it. And that's when I shut down. And I feel like that's a lot of what we talk about with math and in history and all of these things is that kids, if we don't teach them to be okay with the not knowing, if we don't give them the social emotional learning tools to be okay with that, at some point they're much more likely to hit a ceiling versus from a very young age, get them to believe in a growth mindset. Then we've made it possible for them. There's no ceiling at that point. They can continue to go. And I will say, as a recovering math learner, I'm still on my journey as far as math goes right now. I know as an instructional leader, my team, we're on this journey together. We spent a lot of time talking about where SEL and conversations and math all intersect. But we know that the productive struggle is crucial to learning anything. And so for me, SEL really is about giving students the tools to deal with productive struggle without it becoming an experience where they feel shame for not knowing, not getting the math right away, where they can teach each other, but also where they feel like if they put in the effort, they will get where they're going. So for me, when I say that SEL is like a lens through which we view the world, it's recognizing that there's a first step on any learning journey. There's always a first step. So we want students to feel confident and we want to give them emotional literacy to explain how they might be feeling in that moment, but we want to make sure that we're not stealing the struggle away from them. And we know from brain research that it's when your brain is struggling that you're growing the new neurons. If you knew it right away, so in your example of you get it, nothing really happened in your brain at that moment. So we want to really help students understand the emotions, but also the neuroscience behind emotions and growing your brain and creating those new synapses and doing all of that work, which is, we're talking about it at a high level. At the kindergarten level, it's a lot of keep trying, it's okay, recognizing that they might be uncomfortable or frustrated, knowing that frustration is temporary and teaching into the idea that frustration is temporary, for example, and it will eventually get better as long as you continue to put the effort in and developing perseverance and grit for students to hang in there even when it's hard.
What I really like about what you're sharing is a complete reframing of what SEL is, because it can be so easy. And I've known so many people who would struggle with a math problem and then just give up. And what you're seeing is that instead of seeing that ability to give up or not as something that we're born with, just as we're giving students math skills, we're also giving them grit skills or that stick to itness skills, right? Perseverance. It fits a lot with the whole research around neuroplasticity, where you can actually change the way that you think.
Yeah.
Why do you think there isn't more work done or talking about this in schools? Just from the outside looking in, sometimes we get overly caught up with just grades, and there's no way of just even thinking about how do we help our kids navigate this. And sometimes I think we talk about it as like soft skills. It's not really soft, because without those soft skills, you don't get the grades.
Soft skills is the biggest misconception of what SEL really is, that it's soft, that it's fluffy, that it's nice if you can squeeze it in, but it can't take the place of reading, or it can't take the place of math, or it can't take the place of these things. And I don't think anybody is suggesting that it take the place of it. I think what we're suggesting is that it has to be taught alongside, or it has to be embedded. These things should be embedded in the way that we teach. And as far as why we're not doing more of it, I would love to see more of it. I'm very passionate about it. I've been doing this kind of work with students in my classroom for a long time, and I have seen just remarkable transformational shifts from students when you do it. But I think it's like anything in education. It takes time, it takes a buy-in, it takes data to show that it's the right direction to go in. Nothing in education ever moves swiftly. So my dream is that we'll continue to see these shifts, just because I've seen the transformation it can make in students who don't like school, who don't see themselves as a math learner, who don't see themselves as a reader, don't see themselves as a writer. But if we aren't teaching them growth mindset, if we aren't teaching them how to develop grit and how to be uncomfortable and how to have optimism even when it's hard, then I don't really think we're doing our job as educators. Some students in that way, but I don't think we're going to educate all students in this way. And developing grit and perseverance in students never hurt any student. Some kids will be fine without it, and others not going to meet their potential if we don't do this for them or do this with them.
I really like that. How do you embed this kind of instruction into your regular curriculum? Could you give some examples? And as a teacher thinking about your class, there are going to be some that are really great and doing amazing, and some that need
Mhm.
more help. Like, how do we intervene more meaningfully with those that might need more help and encourage those that are already doing great at SEL and grit?
For some students, it's interesting because sometimes it's almost flip flop in a way, in that kids whose school comes naturally, like they learn naturally, they tend to pick things up, tend to be a little bit more resistant to. They haven't had the need hasn't presented itself to be gritty in their work. Whereas other students who I think maybe are struggling in some area feel validated by the recognition that they are using perseverance, that they are being optimistic about the way that they're approaching bringing effort to their work. But explicitly, it's not only the lens through which you teach, but it's the lens through which you teach students to view themselves. I think we teach these concepts at my school. We use life skills. So effort is a life skill, perseverance is a life school skill, honesty. And we celebrate those each week. We highlight one each week and we go through those, and then we honor students who are using those life skills. We honor everybody who's using it. Everybody is using these things all of the time. And what I like to do is just name it for students when I see it. I might name it for students when I see them miss a goal and then at recess with the soccer and then they do it again, and I might name that was effort. And we're working with teachers to name it with students. And then I also think embedded in history, for example, if we're looking at optimism, when you're talking about the explorers, nobody gets on a ship from Spain to sail across the ocean if they don't have a level of optimism. So you can teach optimism right into that history lesson. Or when we're looking at the Native Americans, we can teach empathy right into that. In fact, one of the things we do at my school that I love is all of the classrooms wrote a land acknowledgement, acknowledging we live on the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone in San Mateo County. And so every day we read the pledge and then we read a land acknowledgement from one of the classes. And alongside of that land acknowledgement, where we were teaching Native American history, where we were teaching that, we were also teaching empathy. So, what must it have felt like to have your home come and be taken from you? And we talk about science, environmental stewardship can be embedded right into that the Ohlone took really good care of the land and they were caretakers. And so what commitments can we make alongside of that? And yes, there was the emotionalness of it, but there's also the history that we're teaching anyway. Native Americans are a standard for our third, fourth, and fifth graders. And so we can teach about Native Americans and empathy all at the same time.
That's very profound, because the idea of naming it is critical, because now there's language to talk about SEL, and using examples from history or social studies, you then have both sides role modeling for positive, role modeling for negative, and just building that empathy muscle as well for the kids to get through those
Absolutely.
lessons. I really like that. And one of the struggles that educators might have with SEL is that it's really difficult to measure. It's hard to say Johnny's got great grit and he's doing really well, and maybe Amanda not so much. And then how do we build her up more to be able to stand up for herself and be able to take more agency in the school that she's
Sure.
going to? How do we think about that? Is that even something that we would want to work into SEL education?
I do think we have some ways to measure it. Our school and our district just got our California Healthy Kids survey data back and it measures school connectedness and things like that. And I'm incredibly proud of our school's data. Kids are showing that they definitely feel safe here. They feel emotionally safe here. They feel connected. So we do have some data around that. But I think when we're talking about different students, one of the things that I really insist on with my staff, and they're so great about it already that I don't really need to insist, it's probably not the right word for them, is developing relationships with the students. And so once you have that relationship, you can recognize that everybody's on their own journey, not only their academic journey, alongside of that is their SEL journey. And again, our goal is happy, healthy, thriving 35-year-olds. And we talk a lot about what our role as educators is along that way. What my teachers spend a lot of time getting to know the kids because we are relatively small and because the teachers have been here for so long. A student who is maybe having an issue in 5th grade, their kindergarten teacher is still here. And so we actually have longitudinal qualitative data to go, okay, if we keep in mind where they started, then and we can see their trajectory, we can make good decisions about what might work for this student. While we can explicitly teach all of these things, it doesn't mean that we're going to that we're going to do it the same way for every student. The staff here is really incredible at developing relationships with students and being able to see them from TK all the way through 5th grade. And we know that I'm really proud of how well we know our students here. You can't teach academics or SEL if you don't know your students well and if you don't have solid relationships with them. And so it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about as a staff. We talk about the relationships that we have with students.
That makes so much sense. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, where you talked about students whom ironically are just doing school really well. They might not have the opportunity to exercise grit and exercise perseverance because things come so easily to them. And it just reminds me of another piece of research that I've come across where you have these really good students going to the best colleges and graduating and going to the best jobs. The moment they face a major setback in their life, they're crushed because they've just
Yeah.
never had to deal with that before.
Yeah.
Do you see a risk of that for good students?
I think we even see it much earlier a lot of times than a career. I think if we haven't given them the tools, anytime life hits them hard, it's going to be a major setback. I think what we want to create for students are opportunities to fail when the stakes are really low. So we can help them learn from failure and adjust to it and know that it's a moment of growth for them. So if school is too easy for someone, I think we have to think about how we can challenge students so that they have experience failing while the stakes are much lower than being a young adult and being debilitated by a challenge. I think that's what happens. And I think sadly, we often see it in high schools where kids are doing really well and then maybe they don't get into Harvard and it has like devastating consequences for them. I know Palo Alto for a while was really struggling with a lot of really high achieving kids committing suicide or really struggling with their mental health because they didn't know how to live in the uncomfortableness of failure. I used to tell my 5th grade parents there's exactly one way for students to learn from failure, and we have to let them fail. Don't bring their lunch to them when they've forgotten. If they've forgotten their PE shoes, let them figure that out when the stakes are really low. Because if we don't give them opportunities to do that when the stakes are lower, the impact is much more significant when the stakes are higher. I feel really strongly that we need to provide those opportunities. And if kids are skating by, then I think we challenge that in those students. Not necessarily more challenging academics, but maybe more conversations around what was a skill that was really hard for you to learn, or before you could make it into the goal or do that fancy footwork with soccer, what did you have to learn first? And so I think framing it for students in that way is really important, especially at this age. It's going to be an enormous jump. When my 5th graders leave, from Brewer Island and go to whatever middle school, they're going to experience a jump. And I want to make sure that they're ready to meet those challenges and that we've given them some experience, not just a productive academic struggle, but maybe a failure of some other kind, so that their first time isn't going to be as devastating, that they know that you can recover from that and that we've given them the optimism to recover from a failure.
Yeah, that's so important. And I want to pull on another thread that you mentioned earlier about how all of the theory behind this is great. But when you're a principal and you're leading your staff, leading the community and leading the students, you need to have some level of buy-in and to be able to communicate why a focus on SEL is important and why it's important for everyone to own their own growth in SEL. That speaks humongous volumes about the amount of leadership effort that goes into something like that. How did you get everyone on board with this strategic direction? And you have the benefit of long-standing relationships with many in the staff, but at the same time, you can never take that for granted. So how did you bring this across and get that level of buy-in that you needed?
I think I'm wondering if buy-in is the right word, or if it's more really just recognizing that teachers, like students, any professional, any adult, is on their own journey towards recognizing the importance of social emotional learning, recognizing the importance of empathy in ourselves and in others, navigating our emotions. I think we're all on our own journey. And so I don't know if it was really about buy-in or if it was more about trying to meet parents and teachers and other community members where they're at. And then, just like we do for kids, upping the ante on them a little bit. I think once you've seen the transformation that really good relationships and empathy and grit bring, it's impossible to unsee it. And so, just like for students, when we name it, I think we name it for teachers as well. Maybe not in the same kidsy sort of way, but I think I try and integrate it into a lot of conversations and honor the work that the teachers are doing, because it is hard work and we're not empathetic and patient every day. We're all at various places, not only on our journey long term, but like on a day-to-day basis. I shared that today was a crazy day for me at school. And there were definitely times when I wasn't bringing my best self to the situation, or I wasn't bringing my patience to the situation, or my optimism. And so it ebbs and flows. We all have some level of emotional intelligence, even if that's a very low level, which I'm fortunate not to work with a lot of people in that way. But I have met parents who were like, I just give me the facts, give me this. We're spending too much time on this. It's not academically rigorous enough. Even they're coming with some level of emotional intelligence. And so I think, again, it's just meeting people where they are on their journey and recognizing that you have to have a growth mindset for those parents as well. But I do think once you see it in practice and your student at the table doing homework, not giving up on that math problem and really persevering through it, instead of saying, I can't, I'm not a math person, I can't get this, it becomes something that's hard to deny. I feel like that's the transformational nature of SEL. I feel like does the heavy lifting if you just hang in there with it, with the community.
Got it. So really almost letting the benefits speak for itself and having those early quick wins that build that belief and conviction, I would suppose, in the people that you're leading.
Absolutely. It's never switching a light switch. It's often gradual. So sometimes for students, it looks like they're not crying during homework anymore, or they're not getting a stomach ache before they come to school. It can be incremental. And just like we mentioned before, it's really about every kid is different. Every kid's on their own journey. And how do we validate and recognize and honor where they're at in that journey? And so we do the same with teachers. We do the same with parents and community members. For me, I will say as a leader, being inclusive and kind is the non-negotiable that we start with, because that's just basic building block of any school. And we build in like those non-negotiables of being inclusive and being kind. And then we go from there.
And do you find that you were in a classroom for almost 20 years and teaching at different levels too? How do you feel like that has impacted your outlook as a leader? And has it given you a lot more empathy for the people that you're leading?
Absolutely. I know what it feels like to have one more initiative be put on your plate and to just feel like, how? I don't have enough time. And it's definitely given me empathy as a leader to know if I introduce something new, how I'm going to introduce it, the ability to talk about this, how I might integrate it in to a lesson I was doing or something that I was doing, but also honoring we have collectively, I should have added it up. I would love to know how many years of teaching experience we have on my campus because it's a lot. And I don't have all of the right answers. I learned something from my teachers and from the parents at this school every single day. I get a new idea based off something that they did. As a leader, try and lead from a stance of it being a partnership on what we're doing. But certainly, I know where the pitfalls are in the day-to-day working of a classroom. And I also feel like I can recognize when a teacher I know who has a lot of SEL skills is just at their wit's end. That's not who they are as an educator, and to work with them in that way. I think it's given me a lot of empathy for teachers, and it's made me optimistic about what good teaching can do in the life of a student.
That's incredible. What made you take that step into administration? Because it's quite a big step. It was a very courageous step to step into the unknown after 20 years in the classroom. What made you do it?
It's a great question. I wonder myself sometimes. I didn't see it for a really long time. And when the topic would be broached with me, I would think, no, but I need my community. I love the relationship, like that family unit that I would build as a teacher in my classroom, that sense of community. And then at some point, I just recognized that I wasn't going to necessarily have to sacrifice that level of community to be a school leader and the principal. As a principal, I would be able to maintain that. And I think once I recognized that sense of community wasn't going to go away, I started thinking about how I might be able to have a broader reach with more students than just the 30 that were in my fourth or fifth grade classroom. I would be able to potentially have a bigger impact in the SEL world and in creating this informed citizenry that we talk about and wanting to create a better world, that my reach might be just a little bit bigger if I did it as a school principal. And it took me a long time because I was very reticent to give up that sense of family and community, and I would build as a classroom teacher. And I feel very lucky that in my few different roles as an administrator that I've been able to continue to do that. I feel incredibly fortunate that I didn't lose the thing I was most afraid of losing.
That's wonderful. And for those out there who are listening and they're in education, maybe a little earlier in their journey and thinking about taking that step into leadership, based on your experience, like what's one piece of advice that you would be able to give them?
I would say take on leadership roles early and find what you're really passionate about. I very passionate about social emotional learning. I know some people are very passionate about good quality math instruction or like the best reading practices. And so I would say find out what you're really passionate about early and look for leadership opportunities. There's always leadership opportunities within a school community. And I would look for those, but it's important to know what you're really passionate about so that you can stay true to that no matter what next steps towards a leadership role you might have. I think really knowing who you are as an educator is important. So maybe find that out first and figure out what you're really passionate about, and then look for opportunities just to expand and grow on that passion.
I love that. So taking that time and effort to work on yourself, that knowing yourself first, finding your own passions and understanding that, and then look for opportunities to take leadership roles even if they're informal and non-positional leadership roles?
Absolutely. And do something that makes you uncomfortable. Try out. That's the SEL teacher in me coming out, but do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. Take the risk. The worst thing that can happen is you'll fail and you'll learn and you'll grow. Figure out who you are as an educator, what you really believe, and then take some risks and look for opportunities to expand your passion.
Yeah, I love that. And it takes us full circle on this episode. So we started out talking about grit and finding opportunities to fail that are low stakes. Seems to resonate very much with careers as well. Like before
That's
you have to lead a district and you have, say, 60,000 students to look after, find a way to fail with the stakes are a lot lower. Thank you so much.
It's okay. Fail when the stakes are high. Every failure is an opportunity to learn and just keep chugging along that growth path, whatever your growth path is.
That is a great point because you never stop failing as a leader. Like every leader at every level continually fails and the stakes keep getting higher as you fail. Hopefully with your SEL toolkit, you'll be able to overcome those failures a little bit better and bounce right back to your next success. Thank you so much, Julie, for being with us today. It's been such a pleasure. And for all of you listening, thank you. I hope you've taken away a nugget or two and have been inspired to take on just that little bit more risk that you might potentially fail and have that opportunity to bounce back. That's it for the Engaging Leadership Show today. Until next time, keep leading with passion and purpose. I'll see you in the next episode. And that's all for the Engaging Leadership Show today. If these stories resonated with you at all, head over to engagingleadershipshow.com, all one word, where you can subscribe for free to receive more leadership stories and strategies every week. Also, at that link, you can access the archive of all the featured episodes we published in summary form. It's a veritable treasure trove of educational leadership wisdom distilled for your learning pleasure. Once again, the link is engagingleadershipshow.com. Sign up today to receive the next summary this very week. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and passion, and I'll see you in the next episode.